Sorry, getting back to the original notes. These are notes for Chapter 2, Section 2. I have replaced my microphone at the request of those people who watched the first. So I hope that this is less wildly fluctuating in volume. Okay. So, again, I recommend that you've read the text first, or that you read each section before we talk about it. Based on the essential questions we'll be following here are to describe the flow of energy through an ecosystem, what that looks like, how that feels. We'll occasionally talk about how it's a little bit different from matter. Or identify the ultimate energy source for photosynthetic producers, based on the way food webs work, for the rest of the biological community. We're also going to describe the differences between food chains, food webs, and pyramid models, and some of the flaws within each. Before we begin, I want to make very clear that most of this chapter is talking about energy flows. A little bit's going to talk about matter, especially when we start talking about detritivores and decomposers. But the big difference between energy and matter is that energy leaves. It diminishes over time in every use. Every time energy gets used, some of it gets lost as a little bit of heat. Think about your own body. You do stuff like work out and run and metabolize things. And that's good and you're using that energy, but then occasionally, or constantly rather, your body's giving off body heat. There's no way to capture that heat and use it to do anything productive for you other than keep you warm and warm up moving around you just a smidge. And as that spreads out, it's called entropy, which is random movement of particles. It's useless. So every time that energy is used, in terms of this chapter, eaten by someone, and then that someone lives, there's a little bit less available for the next person to eat. In our Earth, all of our energy, with the notable difference of nuclear fission, those sort of power reactors, comes from the sun. And so when we talk about ecology, all of our energy is going to come from the sun, and then eventually it goes through many processes, but eventually it leaves as heat from our atmosphere. And we're going to talk about some of the natural processes that occurs in food webs and stuff. Matter, on the other hand, is entirely different. The amount of matter on Earth is entirely the same. It does not change at all, except for the addition of the occasional meteorite things. But the percent change there is negligible at this point. And we'll argue that they were very important for initial water content. But currently, for our purposes, we're going to ignore that, just to simplify a lot. Knowing that matter is being recycled, and we can't just get more out of nowhere, means that we have to reuse all of our matter. This means that anything that's currently got matter in it, that needs to be broken down and decomposed so that we have more matter for stuff later. Sometimes you get matter that transfers between ecosystems. Think of a bird that's migrated from Canada to South America, and then that bird died in South America. Well, it took some matter from Canada, or placed on its way, to South America. But that's fine because eventually a bird from South America is going to migrate up to Canada and do the same thing. So the net change isn't that big. The big difference between matter, all of our energy, between matter and energy, is that all the energy arrives from the sun and eventually goes away. It doesn't get recycled. Whereas the matter, you only have what you have and you have to keep reusing it consistently. It's just important to keep those ideas of energy flowing and matter cycling. Alright, here we go. Energy in our ecosystem. Everything comes from the sun. No sun, no nothing. Now, for those of you following the book, here we're on page 41. In particular, we talk about autotrophs and heterotrophs, especially at the basic levels. If you're an autotroph, you might also be called a producer, or in simple terms, a plant. Yay, autotrophs. Plants. Okay? I don't know how to text, so I'm not going to do that. But plants, over here, these are autotrophs. They're producers. They're called producers because they produce all of the usable energy. They produce it from the sun through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Let's highlight that now. Or blue. Blue's good too. Doesn't seem keen on changing it. Photosynthesis. That's important, right? We'll learn a lot more about it later. But in general, it's what turns sun energy into chemical energy, glucose, and that chemical energy is used by the plant to do plant things, and it's eventually used by us when we eat the plant, as seen in this lettuce. Now, of course, we don't just eat lettuce, we eat the bread, which is green. We eat the onion, the tomato, and all of this energy is coming from the plant, which means it's coming from the sun. But, lest we forget, there's this big juicy burger down here. Now it's covered in ketchup or something. That burger is energy coming from an animal. And that animal got its energy by eating, particularly a cow, of course. That animal got its energy by eating plants, which got its energy from the sun. So again, we see that all this energy comes from the sun. Eventually, we can trace it back to the sun. And eventually it'll lead as heat energy. So that was autotrophs, but we did sort of skip into heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are eaters. Whoa, didn't mean to go back there. Heterotrophs are eaters. So what it means is they get their energy by eating. Autotrophs produce their own energy from the sun. Heterotrophs get their energy by eating. That's it. It's that easy. Great. Next. Okay. Now we're pretty much sorry, we're switching more toward 42 here, but 41 is still applicable. We've got the concept of niche. You'll remember from chapter 2, section 1, niche is your job in the ecosystem, what you do. And much of what we do is determined by what we eat and some of our behavior. When we talk about niche, all autotrophs or producers or plants are the original collector of energy. No ecosystem or biological community can function without them. Because if you don't have anyone producing energy, no one else can live. It's that simple. We're not walking around with solar panels on every animal. We only have solar panels on plants in the terms of chlorophyll and chloroplast. So that's their job, is to provide energy. We have other niches like providing habitat and things like that, and shelter, etc. But in terms of energy, their niche is to collect it. Heterotrophs, their niche is seen in their food web. And that we'll discuss later in a couple slides. But it's worth noting that there's a few types of heterotrophs. There's consumers. And basically what that means is you're just transferring energy to the plant. Well, I'm a rabbit and I eat this plant. So I took energy that's trapped in the plant and now it's trapped in the rabbit. And then something else will eat the rabbit and give the rabbit's energy to that new thing. You're just traveling up the line as a consumer. There are 4 categories of consumers. Now we're almost assured. 42. We talk about trophic levels. There's your primary consumer, or your first level consumer. And that's an herbivore. Underline that in green for herb. Your secondary consumers get a little bit more confusing, but generally these guys eat these guys. Arrows backwards. Arrows show the direction of energy, so we'd want to do it like this. This energy goes to tertiary consumers. Okay, third level consumers eat second level consumers. And finally we go tertiary consumers who eat tertiary is really just the top level. Sometimes third level consumers are also tertiary consumers. Tertiary watching. And that sounds nice and simple when you say it like that. Then you get weird animals like omnivores, who are both primary consumers because they're eating plants, but they're also eating insects, and so they might be secondary consumers. And then you have to remember that some insects, like ladybugs, are actually carnivores. So if you're an animal that eats both plants, grasshoppers, ladybugs, suddenly you're eating plants, making you primary consumer. You're eating secondary consumers, the grasshoppers, and tertiary consumers. Then you're eating tertiary consumers, which are ladybugs, which makes you like you're suddenly filling many different roles here. Omnivores are messy. If you thought omnivores were messy, the tridivores are even more messy. Wish I had brown tridivores are decomposers, which means they eat absolutely everything. Right? Everything dies, and so eventually it will be detritus, which will be eaten by something else. Detritus being dead stuff. Now, tridivores are the great recyclers of an ecosystem, but it's worth noting that it's only recycling matter, not energy. They still produce extra heat energy, and that gets wasted to the atmosphere eventually as well, or just soil warmth, which eventually to the atmosphere. If you're interested in the role that tridivores play in the food webs, trophic levels, and all of that, I'm uploading a YouTube video to the Dig Deeper section, not used in the last one, but definitely used in this one, that talks about the brown food web. And that's the food web of dead stuff. It's very interesting, and rather than spend all my time on it here, I just want to let you know that it exists. Watch it in the Dig Deeper section. Excellent. Alright, now we're on 42 and 43 and 44. There's 45 there, but we go all the way to 44. We talk about trophic levels. Those are the producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, third level consumer, and top level consumer. Right? As viewed here. Trophic levels are nice, but they're messy for reasons that we just said. This fish might eat these crawfish, but it might also eat clams, or herbivorous consumers, primary consumers that were insects. So is it second or first? It's a little weird. Ooh, I also hate this name. Let's cross this out. First level, this is country. Second level, this is country. So, our herbivorous consumers, or herbivores, are primary. These are secondary. The big thing about being a top consumer is that nothing really eats you. It's good, but it's not necessarily equal. You'll see, and I do like the way they do this, that at every level, energy is lost. We always lose energy, as we mentioned before, regardless of what this is. That loss of energy is why you see it as a pyramid. There's less energy here than there is here because some of it was lost. There's less energy at the secondary consumers because some of it was lost during the primary consumers, meaning that there's less. This rule of less energy means that there's less organisms means less matter, and that's what we're seeing over on this side. Over here, I don't know if you can see on else, but on the decomposer side, all those lines are going to decompose. So that's the loss of matter, which gets recycled. You'll notice that the energy doesn't get recycled. It just floats away into outer space, never to be seen again. But that's fine because we get all this new sun energy coming in. Energy flows, matter cycles. So very cool. That's trophic levels. When we talk about food chains, we're pretty much just going to talk about them enough to say that we're not going to talk about it. The idea that there's only one pathway for energy, that's what a food chain is, right? We got these different creatures, all represented by logs. The idea that the energy of one goes into the next. That's way too elementary. There's so many different pathways that we can get, and that's what this food web is showing, right? Our pyramid over here is seen as a chain. Oh, to this, to that, to that, to that, to that. Oh, the dolphins are really this. But food webs are much more complicated. And you can see a really good picture of a food web on page 43. And we're even going to practice making some food webs in class. We mentioned this trophic pyramid a lot, which shows up trophic levels. But for the reasons that trophic levels are messy, like omnivores and herbivores, and carnivores often need multiple different levels below them, they're useful because we can kind of see that idea of the higher up you go in your level of eatery, the less mass and energy is found there. But it's messy because producers and primary consumers, the secondary, third, fourth, and fifth level consumers, which are all carnivores and omnivores, they're hard to label because what they eat changes. The ones that are really easy are your producers and your primary consumers, or herbivores. Because, as I mentioned, omnivores don't fit in, and this pyramid blatantly shows that decomposers aren't even considered, which again is a terrible decision because they're really, really important, and I encourage you to watch the Ground Food Web video in the Dig Deeper section. I think that's all I've got for us today. Yep, that's my last one. Hope you found this helpful. Again, please, in the discussion board, let me know if this mic is working better and other things that I can do to try and make this a little bit more effective as a supplement to our notes. See you guys tomorrow.